Well, I want to welcome our witnesses here today. Welcome to the hearing on the fiscal year 2020 budget request, the United States Special Operations Command and U.S. Special Operations Forces. It's an understatement to say that the world has changed since the establishment of the command in 1987. 9/11 dramatically altered the national security landscape. SOF personnel have been deployed for almost 2 decades, and despite policy shifts and planned drawdowns, even today they continue to deploy in support of Operation Inherent Resolve and Operation Enduring Freedom. Outside of declared theaters of active armed conflict, geographic combatant commanders have what some would call an insatiable appetite for SOF to achieve their objectives in their campaign plans, and they have made use of congressional authorities granted to the Department over the last decade, including security cooperation, support of ongoing operations, exercises, and other activities to do so. The Department has recognized that GCC requirements are a major contributor to the high op tempo. For instance, one stated purpose for the African Command Force Optimization effort announced in November 2015 was to decrease the burden on SOF. However, optimization relies upon events that may not transpire anytime soon, such as assignment of Security Force Assistant Brigade to the continent. And I'm concerned that this optimization may be happening without an adequate plan to continue to support our partners and allies in Africa and beyond. For years, I've highlighted this ever-increasing demand, and SOF has critical skill sets and conduct activities that can be employed across the full spectrum of conflict and against all types of warfare. They are the force of choice, yet we must be prudent about how the force is employed, or we risk breaking the tip of the spear. General Tony Thomas, the previous commander of Socom, took action to manage the demand of SOF. To that end, the deployed-to-dwell ratio has improved for a substantial percentage of the force, yet more must be done to continue this positive trend and reduce the burden on our SOF personnel. As Socom aligns to the National Defense Strategy, continuing to understand and manage that demand, not just increasing the size of the force, will remain a key component of readiness. Prior to his retirement, General Thomas, along with Assistant Secretary of Defense for Low-Intensity Conflict, Mr. Erwin West, began an effort related to professionalism and ethics training in the force. The effort is to understand and correct what they identified as a disordered value system in the force, and I applaud his efforts in that respect. This committee is committed to maintaining a sound culture our quiet professionals can thrive in, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses how they plan to continue to build on the efforts that are underway. The FY20 budget request for U.S. Socom totals $13.8 billion. As in years past, there is more than $4 billion of Socom funding requested in the Overseas Contingency Operations Account, or OCO. Approximately 90% of Socom funding in OCO is for activities and programs that are enduring. This concerns me because baseline funding is crucial to providing U.S. Socom stability. Furthermore, when base funding is improperly classified as contingency, it prevents Congress from fulfilling its oversight role in considering the totality of enduring defense spending in the current and future years. So I'm pleased that the Socom request includes SOF peculiar investments in technologies outlined in the NDS, such as directed energy, cyber, and space capabilities. However, as I recently noted in the subcommittee's hearing on science and technology, I remain concerned that policy is not being developed as fast as the technology. So maturation of policy and technology must occur simultaneously so that we can field the latest and greatest capabilities to our warfighters. Socom's proposed investments in behavioral health and family support under the Preservation of the Forest and Families Initiative has certainly increased. But tragically, in 2018, suicide rates amongst SOF nearly tripled. This troubles me. Family support and behavioral health should be considered as important, if not more important, as the physical well-being aspects of the initiative. So we must take care of our people and our families. Socom's budget request also includes investments for implementation of some of the recommendations from the Nigeria investigation, like those related to training. This is important progress, and I'm glad to see the command is not resting on its laurels with respect to the incident in Nigeria. However, I remain disappointed and dismayed that the department has not yet provided the families of the fallen or the American people with the final decisions on awards and reprimands, and is conducting yet another review almost a year and a half later. Socom's budget request also is only 2% of the department's total request. When coupled with funding requested by the military departments and other agencies for support, the total requested funding related to SOF is over $20 billion, or about 4% of the total DOD request in FY20. The military department's budget requests and efforts have a profound impact on SOF. Since release of the NDS, we have carefully scrutinized Socom's alignment to the outlined priorities, but we haven't been as diligent in ensuring the services continue to support Socom requirements for a sustainable counterterrorism campaign and fully account for SOF equities in budget decisions related to future capability development and posture. This hearing provides us an opportunity to understand where there may be a mismatch in budget requests and how service challenges like recruiting and retention impact Title X responsibilities of Socom. So with that, testifying today is Mr. Mark Mitchell, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict. Secretary Mitchell is a decorated Army combat vet from the SOF community who was amongst the first U.S. soldiers on the ground in Afghanistan after 9/11. For his actions in battle alongside the Northern Alliance during November 2001, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, our nation's second highest military award. He commanded a Joint Special Operations Task Force in Iraq from 2010 to 2011. In 2014, Mr. Mitchell served in the National Security Council as the Director for Counterterrorism on the National Security Council, where he was a critical player in the efforts for the Presidential Policy Review of Hostage Policy. Mr. Mitchell, welcome back, and I want to thank you for your service to our country. I certainly look forward to hearing from you about continued implementation and execution of Section 922 of the fiscal year 2017 National Defense Authorization Act. This legislation elevated the role and responsibility of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict to a service-like Secretary for Socom. So welcome to you. Also before us is General Richard D. Clarke. General Clarke assumed command of Socom less than 2 weeks ago. General Clarke, I want to welcome you, and I want to thank you for being here. General Clarke has served the nation for nearly 35 years. His most recent assignment was on the Joint Staff as Director of Strategy for Plans for Strategy, Plans, and Policy, J5. He served as the Commanding General of the 82nd Airborne, spent 6 years in the 75th Ranger Regiment in CENTCOM and UCOM, and was the Director of Operations at Joint Special Operations Command from 2009 to 2011, including during the Osama bin Laden raid. General Clarke was also the Commandant of Cadets at West Point. He has deployed countless times to Iraq and Afghanistan and deployed in support of Operation Desert Storm. He is a recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal and Defense Superior Service Medal. He appears before us today as the 12th Commander of Socom. General, I want to welcome you here today.
Thank you, Chairman.
General, I just again want to thank you for your service, and with your background, you are well poised to ensure that Socom is structured appropriately and ready to effectively execute the NDS, as well as to fulfill coordinating authority responsibilities. And before I turn to the ranking member, I also want to take the opportunity to thank Mrs. Clarke, who I know is here with you today. I just had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting your wife, and I just want to thank her for her commitment to our nation and for lending you to us and supporting you in your work. So welcome to you, Mrs. Clarke. With that, before we go to opening statements, I want to now recognize Ranking Member Stefanik for her remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Langevin, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Let me begin by welcoming back Mr. Mitchell to our committee, and also I want to echo Mr. Langevin remarks and congratulating General Clarke on assuming command of U.S. Special Operations Command. While Jim highlighted many of your leadership roles within the U.S. military, he skipped over a very important chapter that's near and dear to my heart. I want to thank you for your service at Fort Drum as the Deputy Commanding General, and thank Mrs. Clarke for her years of service as well. I'm the proud representative of the 10th Mountain Division in Congress, so I just wanted to note your leadership for my constituents who are watching here today. Today's event continues our series of traditional posture hearings as we examine the FY20 budget request for U.S. Special Operations Command and prepare for the National Defense Authorization Act. I am pleased to see continued support for Special Operations Forces in this budget request. This force remains very much at war, directly and indirectly deployed to more than 80 countries at any given time. They continue to bear an outsized burden, absorbing some 40% of recent combat casualties, while we also witness significant increases in suicides across the force. And amidst this continued strain and heavy combat commitments throughout the Middle East and Africa, we are now also asking our Special Operations Forces to position themselves to counter and mitigate nation-state threats such as Russia, China, North Korea, and other emerging national security threats. While the FY20 budget request for Special Operations Command is seemingly a modest 2.8 increase to $13.8 billion, when taken in aggregate, this year marks yet again continued and seminal growth for our Special Operations Forces. In particular, we are seeing nearly 18 consecutive years of end strength growth, which will now approach 74,000 personnel. And for context, that is almost as large as the Department of State and roughly twice the size of the FBI. Make no mistake, this growth was needed after 9/11 and indeed can still be justified today due to the continued and morphing national security threats we face. But while our 21st century challenges demand high-end capabilities that only SOF can provide, we must continually work to ensure that this force remains balanced and modernized, and that we are adhering to one of the most central of all the SOF truths, that quality is better than quantity. On this point, we can never compromise. We should also remember that most of the realized growth of our Special Operations Forces was originally envisioned to support heavy and continued demands for counterterrorism and direct action forces and skill sets. How much of those experiences will shape our thinking about future conflicts remains to be seen. Considering this, I would also like to highlight that now, more than ever, as we consider the growth of this force, we must also ask ourselves if we are truly building the force of the future, rather than just the force of today and yesterday. What unique and strategic contributions can only Special Operations make to our national security to counter and frustrate peer adversaries such as China and Russia? To date, I do not think that we have thoughtfully answered this important question. I have long said that a large part of this subcommittee's charge is looking far ahead to consider what's next. And in doing so, I see great opportunity for Special Operations Forces to leverage emerging technology in novel and forward-leaning ways. Artificial intelligence, quantum, and high-performance computing, nanotechnology, and 5G communications, if leveraged right, will all provide a significant battlefield advantage for Special Operations Forces and the broader joint force. Rest assured, our adversaries are already aggressively exploring the development of these exponential technologies, which present us with both economic and strategic national security challenges for our nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing. I look forward to the dialogue in both the open and closed session, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ranking Member Stefanik. And before we go to our witnesses, I'll just mention that we are expecting votes to be called any minute. I'm hoping that we can get through both opening statements, and we will recess once votes are called, and then be back right after that to continue the hearing. So with that, we'll now hear from our witnesses, and then move into the question and answer session. And then after the opening session, the committee will reconvene in a closed classified session. With that, your opening statements in full will be submitted to the record without objection, and you each now invited to summarize your statements. With that, let me begin by recognizing Secretary Mitchell.
Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Stefanik, and other members of this committee, especially my former colleagues, Andy Kim, Melissa Slotkin, and Mike Waltz. Congratulations on your election and your service on this committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify on our global posture for the Department of Defense Special Operations Enterprise. My remarks will focus on SOLEC's statutory authority within the administrative chain of command for Socom and overseeing the SOF enterprise. I'm honored to testify alongside General Richard Clarke, with whom I've had the privilege of serving in a combat zone and hold in the highest regard. I'd also like to recognize his lovely wife, Ms. Suzanne Clarke, and thank her for her long service. I believe she is a lifelong member of the Army family, and that doesn't come without a cost. The breadth and capability of our SOF force is astonishing. Operating in over 80 countries, this Vanguard force tackles our most pressing challenges in the most hostile environments. In the past 2 years, 25 members of the SOF community have been killed in action, and many more have sustained life-altering injuries. While SOF accounts for just 3% of the joint force, it has absorbed over 40% of the casualties in this time. The families of those men and women carry the burden of the individual tragedy so that we can help prevent a national tragedy. This is a unique time for service in the SOF enterprise because it's an inflection point. First, Section 922 has reinvigorated SOLEC's partnership with Socom. And secondly, the National Defense Strategy has challenged us to increase our focus on long-term strategic competition with Russia and China. The SOF enterprise is in the midst of a transformation, something special operators have always done very well. In November, General Clarke's predecessor, General Thomas, and Assistant Secretary West issued the first ever joint vision for the SOF enterprise, challenging our professionals to innovate relentlessly in pursuit of a decisive competitive advantage. To improve SOF's readiness for contingencies across the vast spectrum of warfare, we continue to make tremendous progress in reducing the strain caused by high operational tempo and demand. At the height of the wars, a large portion of our force was spending as much time overseas as in the United States. This year, over 90% of our force will spend at least twice as much time at home as they will in deployment. I'm proud to report to you that our SOF force is healthy, poised, and eager to defend the nation against increasingly adaptive foes. Building on our 2019 trajectory to develop a more resilient, ready, and lethal SOF enterprise, the FY20 budget requests the resources necessary to sustain our readiness while supporting recapitalization and modernization of SOF peculiar capabilities. As called for in the NDS, we have prioritized investments in technology to enhance lethality and effectiveness of the force, focusing our modernization on precision strike, directed energy, artificial intelligence, close combat lethality, cyber, and space operations. Our $13.8 billion baseline budget request embraces innovative capabilities that result in greater lethality, increases in efficiencies and flexibility, and strengthens our ties to allies and partners. The request supports an end strength increase of approximately 2.2%, while we continue to mitigate shortfalls in certain enablers. As we continue to make progress in meeting these challenges, ASD West and I share the committee's concerns about the serious ethical failings of some members of our SOF community. While they don't reflect the true nature of the SOF professional, such incidents erode morale and the confidence of our partners and our elected representatives and our moral authority. I can assure you that these incidents have our full attention. Last year, Socom and SOLIC jointly issued clear guidance to the force, and our office recently provided a report to Congress on a review of our professionalism ethics. We continue to explore ways to enhance oversight and accountability by senior leaders, and will continue to be held to the highest regards, high standards, including professionalism ethics. Finally, I'd like to thank this subcommittee for its continued strong support of our mission and personnel. The sustained funding and authorities you provide are essential to our success in advancing national security interests at home and abroad, and in caring for our service members and our families. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Mitchell. General Clarke, you are now recognized for your opening statement.
Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Stefanik, and distinguished members of the committee, I am grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today and honored to work with ASD SOLIC in guiding our Special Operations Forces during this time of change and challenge. I'm glad to be here with my teammate, Mark Mitchell, who has mentioned that we've served together in combat in Iraq in the past. U.S. Socom feels ready and capable forces that conduct special operations globally to support geographic combatant commanders as an integral part of the joint force. We have extraordinarily dedicated and talented men and women who relentlessly fight and sacrifice for our country and our way of life. This morning, we interred at Arlington National Cemetery CW2 Jonathan Farmer, a Special Forces officer from South Florida who was killed in action in Manbij, Syria on January 16th of this year. John was a seasoned soldier with 6 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. He leaves behind a wife and 4 children. Their devotion and courage are representative of the surviving teammates and families. On their behalf, let me say thank you for your consistent support from Congress in their endeavors. Command Sergeant Major Pat McCauley, who is here with me today, and our SOCOM senior enlisted leader, and I fully understand that the support is contingent upon the trust and faith that you place in us to execute our missions to the highest professional standard and ethical and our moral obligations. We are also aware that members of our SOF units have failed in recent times to always meet these standards. This misconduct erodes that trust. While the vast majority of U.S. SOCOM teammates serve with honor and distinction, as our ethos demands, perfection is our goal where our values and our laws are concerned. We will push forward with our efforts to reinforce our core values. You have my commitment that I will hold people accountable and preserve the trust that America has in its Special Operations Forces. U.S. SOCOM's mission is to defend the homeland from the continued threat of violent extremist organizations as we deter, disrupt, or defeat threats from revisionist and rogue states in line with the priorities laid out in our national defense strategy. We are postured to address these challenges by providing unique capabilities alongside our interagency colleagues and international partners. My chief assigned task is to organize, train, and equip SOF to fight and win against these threats, many of which are advancing a technological and tactical capability. To this end, we are reshaping and refocusing our current forces and capabilities while developing new means and methods for future missions. As Secretary Mitchell mentioned, our joint SOLIC, SOCOM, SOF vision moves us forward in this regard. Our SOCOM 2020 budget aligns with this vision and reflects the drive for innovative capabilities that increase efficiencies, improve lethality, and strengthen ties to allies and partners. We are prioritizing the right capabilities required for these NDS priorities and sustaining investments in advanced training infrastructure to support program force structure. None of these initiatives are possible without Congress's watchful eye and support in securing the authorities and resources needed to sustain the world's most capable special operations forces. So let me thank you again for your support of U.S. Socom and our time before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General and Secretary, for your opening statements. I want to extend my condolences to the SOF community for their most recent loss, and thank you for highlighting that that today, the ceremony at Arlington. With that, the votes have been called. We are going to stand in recess. Yeah, we will stand in recess subject to the call of the chair, which will be within 10 minutes after votes. The committee will come to order. Again, I want to thank the witnesses for the opening statements. Thank both of you for your service to the country. And General Clarke, if I could, I'd like to begin with you for questions, and then I'll yield to the ranking member. In 2001, Socom comprised approximately 46,000 military personnel and civilians. Since that time, Socom has grown to almost 72,000, with additional proposed end strength increases this year. Now, some of that growth can be attributed to new Socom responsibilities, such as becoming the coordinating authority for weapons of mass destruction, and other growth intended to increase readiness of SOF and address growing demand. However, as I noted in my opening statement, Socom cannot solely rely on growth of the force to alleviate the high operational tempo of SOF, especially when recruiting and retention plague the services and demand continues to increase. So further, 1 to 2 deployment to dwell ratios may be a goal of Socom, but much of that time is spent preparing for the next mission. So it's unclear to me why that is considered optimal when there are when there's no time off between deployments unless you're actually preparing for the next one. So stress and strain on the force is significant, and I wanted to know what steps you're going to take to manage the growing demand on the force and ensure preparedness for assigned missions to include sustainable terrorism operations and alignment to the NDS.
Chairman, a couple things that I'd highlight. I'm glad you brought up the 1 to 2 dwell ratio that the department guidance has moved us to. The feedback that I've gotten is that has been exceptionally helpful for our force, gives them time in the deployment. But that's more of a minimum that we're driving to. There are many of the forces are actually at 1 to 3, which is our goal, and that's for the active component. So that would be the first point, and that ability for us to be predictable and allow the additional training time has greatly increased the readiness, which goes to the point you get in terms of the mission and the preparedness for the mission. I think it's key to note for this committee that we're looking hard at what missions we actually are going to take part in at the request of the geographic combatant commands, those missions to which we're committed are in our vital national interest, that in fact no other force can do those. So could a conventional force actually do those, or could that mission go to our allies or partners in a specific region? And so the manner in which we look at these missions and employ those SOF forces forward on behalf of the geographic combatant commanders will be key. And I think to note, our reduction in forces over a 5-year trend is actually down between 15% and 20% right now, using a 5-year average of numbers deployed. So we are actually trying to optimize the force across SOF.
What percentage of the force is at 1 to 3 now, and when do you think you'll reach your goal?
Congressman, of the as you talked, the 70,000+, there are some that don't necessarily fall in that pattern at all. I'd have to come back to you to say which forces overall are at 1 to 3, but there are a good amount of our forces that are already at that 1 to 3 today.
Yeah, I mean, it would be helpful just to quantify 1 to 3, 1 to 2, and then the 1 to 1 ratio. What's
So the 1 to 2 is a minimum, and 1 to 3 is our goal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So on that point, will you conduct a comprehensive review of SOF organization, capabilities, and structure to determine adequacy, like the one conducted in 2013, 2014, as mandated by Congress? And should there be another relook since the NDS has been published since this assessment?
Mr. Chairman, we have a report that is currently being prepared. It's in staffing within the department that is looking at that, doing a comprehensive review of U.S. Socom roles and missions, and we expect to deliver that report on time in May.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, what actions do you believe the department can take to better balance the workload across the joint force?
In addition to the steps that General Clarke has already outlined, for our part, we're looking across the globe at prioritizing, again, those strategic engagements for the force. And I would point out that the NDS, the whole point of the NDS is to compete in peacetime without, short of armed conflict. And our soft forces in that environment are really multidimensional. In other words, you can't look at a CT, what's ostensibly a CT deployment to Africa is also a part of that great power competition against the Russians and the Chinese, and where we're the force of choice. So we're trying to look at our employment of the soft force from a holistic view to ensure that we're maximizing the return on that investment, both again to our CT mission and our great power competition.
Thank you. And as a follow-up for you, Secretary Mitchell, so what role do you actually play in allocation of SOF through the Global Special Operations Synchronization effort, since allocating force is not solely a military matter, obviously, but a political military task assisted, as stated by the NDS Commission? And also, how are you approaching managing the high demand for SOF?
So our Secretariat for Special Operations, which was created in response to Section 922, and which is expanding, they actively participate in the SOCOM Global Special Operations synchronization process, and we get another vote when the SecDef orders book comes up for staffing with those deployments. And that's really where we, as the Special Operations enterprise, and ASD SOLIC has an opportunity to influence those high demand items, because if they are not at a 1 to 2 deployment ratio, it requires a Secretary of Defense waiver. And as a management tool, we can request that the Secretary decline that waiver. And that's really our main management tool for that.
Has that happened often where the waiver is requested?
So this is the first year that we've had with the formal 2 to 1 ratio, and there is the SecDef orders book is in processing for next FY, for FY20. I'm sorry, the current process for FY21, and so that's where we are exerting that influence, and we're looking very closely at those forces to make recommendations. So it's a process is ongoing as we speak.
Thank you, Secretary. With that, I have additional questions, but I'll hold there and yield to the ranking member for questions.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on what I mentioned in my opening statement, the fact that approximately 40% of all recent casualties are SOF, and we are also seeing increases in suicide rates and ideations that we've seen in 2018 most recently. I am pleased that the budget request increases the Preservation of the Force and Families program by more than 30%, with continued funding for the Defense Health Program. That said, I wanted to ask you, General Clarke, how specifically do we plan on addressing increased suicides, this pressure on the families. It's tied into Chairman Langevin's question regarding the 1-to-2, 1-to-3 ratio. And how do we also address other problems such as lapses in ethics and discipline that are symptoms of a force under tremendous strain of 18 years of high operational tempo deployment?
First, to the first point on behavioral health and the suicide rate, I think it is important to note that the suicide trend from 13 to 18 was actually statistically down, but one suicide is far too many, and we continue to put the emphasis on each and every one of our service members that are in need. I'm glad you mentioned specifically the preservation of the force and family, because in this year's budget request, we asked for additional funds from Congress. The majority of those additional funds are in the behavioral health arena. They are to put at the brigade group level to make sure we have additional behavioral health assistant at each and every one of those groups to help identify, not only for that group, but also to help the family members. Because many times we find that the person that is best able to sense or see a change in a service member is actually the spouse. Mm-hmm. So that's why the force and family aspect of this is really critical in that program. And so thanks for Congress for continuing to support that initiative and for behavioral health. On the lapses in discipline, obviously for ASD SOLIC submitted a report to Congress addressing that issue specifically, but internal to Socom, we conducted a 90-day review. It was initiated by General Thomas in January. That review is in. I will meet with next week. I am hosting a commanders conference with all the component commanders, and that is one of the top topics that we will discuss next week. For now that the report is in from ASD SOLIC, is how do we view this problem, and how are we going to, in fact, get after the root causes of any ethical lapses we've had in the past, and what do we do going forward?
And I wanted to ask a follow-up on the 90-day review that has been completed. This committee is very interested in getting briefed on what was found in that review and recommendations moving forward. So I'd ask for your commitment to make sure that the findings of the most recent 90-day review are briefed to this subcommittee.
You have my commitment to that.
Thank you. My next question is sort of at a 30,000-foot level. I talked about in my opening statement the importance of building a force for the future rather than of today and yesterday. And we've been very focused on the CT mission. But as we face growing threats from nation states like China and Russia, can you talk to me, both Mr. Mitchell and General Clarke, how this budget request and our overall strategy does that, and what specifically, what are the unique and strategic contributions that only special operations can make to our national security when it comes to combating nation-state adversaries? So
let me start off with the 30,000-foot view and what those strategic contributions are. We've grown accustomed in the special operations community to being the supported force for most of the last 18 years because we have been the tip of the spear on the CT fight. However, moving forward, particularly in great power competition, our special operations forces are not necessarily going to be in that fight because it's the whole idea of the strategy is to avoid a kinetic fight. And in that regard, I've urged, and the command has responded by looking to Cybercom, to Stratcom, to Transcom, and the global combatant commands, and seeing how we can best integrate our forces and provide support to those in those other domains. And I think the special operations community is uniquely suited to build networks of partners and allies around the globe to put us in a position, first of all, to compete for that influence and legitimacy in peacetime, and secondly, to be in a position should armed conflict arise, that we can help support our conventional forces, which will be the decisive force in a conflict with Russia or China, to be successful and also help to defeat the strategies that our adversaries would impose.
General Clarke.
Taking that, and I think there's two specific things that I would highlight to the committee that allow us to compete. Number one is the authority to train foreign forces or regular forces with the 1202 authority that was granted by Congress. We do that on behalf of the geographic combatant commander. And in a closed session, I can talk some of the details of that allow us to compete. But I think that is something we should talk to the committee about, how we can compete in a narrow focus, coordinated with our interagency partners, and that allow us to be in that competition sphere. The second thing that I would highlight for the committee is the MISO. Which is inherently our military information support operations, which is inherently a special operations force task with our PSYOP forces. With this Congress giving the funding for the Joint MISO Web Ops Center, which the department determined would be resident in Tampa, that would cut across the geographic combatant commanders, so that we can get our messages out that are aligned with Department of State's Global Engagement Center, and allow us to compete in that space ahead of time, and make sure that we're countering some of the vitriol that's coming out of Russia at this time, and the falsehoods. So I can talk more about that in closed session.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Luis. And I want to also reiterate what the ranking member had brought up in terms of continuing to work with the committee on the professionalism and ethics review. I think that's important. We need to make sure that we get that right. It goes right to the heart of the health. It's also the force, and make sure they have the right training and support. With that, Mr. Kim is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on out here. I'm going to probably reserve most of my questions for the closed session, but I just wanted to go off of what the ranking member just brought up. I think that's critically important for us on this committee to be able to articulate well, both to our colleagues as well as to our constituents, the mission of what it is that your organizations are doing going forward as we see the near-peer conversation and this great power competition become more and more in our lexicon once again. So with Mr. Mitchell, I just wanted to go back to what you were saying. You were talking about some of the efforts that you're working on with Cybercom, and I guess I just wanted to ask, how is that integrating in? How is Socom integrating in with Cybercom, and how are those roles and responsibilities being deconflicted there?
So I would just start off by saying that I believe that Cybercom has been an important addition to our nation's arsenal, long overdue, and happy to see that there and actually out now working on behalf of the nation. As I stated earlier, we have a responsibility to help coordinate with that. We do have liaisons there at Cyber Command, and the Socom does, and works very closely with them to ensure that we're integrated. I'll let General Clarke address some of them.
Some of the specific details that we work with Cybercom, I can talk more in detail in a closed session. But Congressman Kim, I think the key for me with General Nakasone going forward is that we have a relationship that is clear in our division. There is no overlap with Cybercom and Socom, but in fact, it is a relationship that gets after our national security interest.
Thank you. I mean, we'll look forward to picking that back up in the closed session. Just again, continuing on this thread, some of the different roles and responsibilities that you talked about coming under this NDS, MISO, and some of the other efforts that you mentioned. A lot of these are ones that SOCOM had been conducting previously as well. So I guess I'm questioning, does the NDS actually change anything for Socom? Do you feel like there are new missions or new entities within what it is you're doing that are coming up because of this, now greater focus on near peer and great power competition?
Let me just say, I do think there will be. We're in the early stages of implementing the NDS. I point out that the NDS calls for a focus on great power competition, but it recognizes that the fight against violent extremist organizations is not going away, and we've got to balance that. I do think we'll see some new concepts for employment of special operations forces moving forward, and we're working with the services to ensure that we are integrated with their development efforts. A lot of them are implementing experiments with employment and making sure that we are tied in with them, because the fifth soft truth is that successful special operations require support from general purpose forces.
Appreciate it. Anything else to add?
The asymmetric advantage that we have over the two great power competitors of Russia and China is our allies and partners. And Mr. Mitchell mentioned it, but as we look at where we posture our force to be in that great power competition, and as we place forces at the right time to compete on the edges with those near peer competitors, I think that alone sends a signal. But then if you bolster it with the information operations and a small team, small element of special operations forces can bring a significant impact working with foreign forces.
The other thing I'll just add there, just from my time seeing how Socom and our special forces have been operating, I would say and add to it, just saying that the coalitions that you have built with our partners around the world, I've seen the special ops side of things have deeper ties with other forces across our partners, more so than pretty much anything else that I've witnessed. And I think that would be a great place for you to be able to build that out going forward as we try to realize the true potential of Socom there with this new strategy. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. And Mr. Bacon is now recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of you for being here today. And we ought to just say right up front, our special forces are the best in the world. Battle-proven, battle-hardened, virtually every day, going back 18 years. And I was fortunate enough to serve with you all in the conventional air forces, supporting you with ISR, electronic warfare, but then also a year in Iraq, more or less part of your team. And I just say the results day in and day out were remarkable, and I know it continues. So my hat's off to you and your team. My first question is about light attack aircraft, and I defer to which one is best to ask. But as you know, the Air Force, it had signaled that it was going to produce a light attack aircraft, whether it be a light attack bomber or ground attack fighter type aircraft. And now it subsequently looks like it's changed directions on that. It is my position, there's still a need for it, though, because F-35s, F-22s are high-end. We need something for that permissive environment that's cheaper to operate or more efficient to operate. So is there a requirement for Socom for a light attack type platform? And should this fall in your bucket?
I'll take first attempt at this one. First, concur. Light attack aircraft is a need for Socom. And I think it's a need for our nation, and I see it for two primary reasons. One, it will help our special operators on the ground for identification and protection from and of enemy forces. Second reason, as we look at the foreign internal defense of other nations, many nations are now developing their own air forces. In many cases, they are light attack. And so to train with those nations as developing countries, with SOCOM FID forces is something that is really inside our job, inside SOCOM. We will work with the Air Force. I will work with General Goldfein to look at the timing and the mix and where we go forward with that. So you have my commitment to do that with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and his team. I don't know specifically some of the programmatics at this point in time to be able to address that, but identify as a need.
Secretary Mitchell.
Yes, I'd like to add that, from our perspective, the NDS calls on us to have a more cost-effective counterterrorism effort. The most cost-effective CT effort is the one done by our partners and allies, if we can help them be successful. And many of them simply don't have the resources to put into, fifth-generation fighters. And from a strategic perspective, we think the flight hours for those fifth-generation fighters are best spent preparing and deterring our near-peer competitors. So we see a real important need for a light attack moving forward, and are hopeful to come up with a suitable solution with the Air Force.
Second question's on DCGS, the Distributed Common Ground System for Intelligence and Exploitation. As you may recall, the Army had done investments but did a lot of internal R&D and then found they were not in compliance, lost a couple of court cases. I think there's been some efforts by Socom to do something similar with your own DCGS capabilities. And so are we confident we're doing the right thing, that we're not looking at commercial off-the-shelf capabilities first and then going internal? And I just want to make sure that you feel like you're in compliance and doing that right.
I'm going to have to take that back for the record. My understanding of where we're at, though, is that the systems that are going into the DCGS SOF is commercially available software and systems, but we owe you a more in-depth answer on that.
One last question, as I got about 1 minute left here. There's some various allegations on civilian casualties in AFRICOM. Can you just tell us some of the processes that you go through to be as safe and as smart about this as possible? Because I know how hard you try, but I think it's important for the committee to hear and our citizens.
So first, let me say that from ASD Solic, we have responsibility for civilian casualties as part of our portfolio. Even though the Deputy Undersecretary, Dave Trachtenberg, has been named as the senior civilian official, we provide him support. We go through extensive measures, typically many, many hours of ISR, watching targets, trying to ensure with the highest level of certainty that there are no non-combatants in there. In the case of the AFRICOM casualty estimate, or civilian casualties, unfortunately, the command, in reviewing their film, identified that, but failed to report it up. And that's why so much time went through. But we take it very seriously. We're in the process of developing a department-wide directive on mitigating civilian casualties, reporting, tracking, and responding. So it's something that Secretary Mattis and Secretary Shanahan take very seriously.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Mr. Crow is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mitchell and General Clarke, for your long and distinguished service to the country. I know General Clarke, last time we saw each other was at Bagram in 2005 when we were both members of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Rangers lead the way. And thank you, Mrs. Clarke, for your long history of service to the country as well. And as a former captain, when I walk into a room, I immediately try to identify the command sergeant major. Sergeant Major McCauley, thank you. I understand you are retiring next month, so congratulations on that retirement, and thank you for your long history of service to our country as well. We are at our 18th year of war now. There's twice as many soft forces deployed as there were before 9/11. We're operating in over 80 countries, as you indicated earlier, Mr. Mitchell. The suicide rates have been well documented. It's a theme that you're picking up from the committee here. I and many of my colleagues are gravely concerned with the stress that we are putting on our force. Undoubtedly, as Mr. Bacon indicated, our special operations forces are the best in the world, and when people are very good at what they do, they're often asked to do a lot. And we have continued to add to that mission. over the last 18 years. And I know Socom now does the counter WMD mission, the synchronization of plans and operations for global terrorist network operations, lead for DOD's security force assistance, all in addition to traditional CT and foreign internal defense and direct action missions. Simply put, I am gravely concerned that we are overtasking SOF. And as we pivot to great power competition, I just see no scenario under which SOF isn't asked to pick up more of the burden for our legacy operations. So all of that said, which of those new mission sets least align with the historical mission set in the mission of Socom? And if you had a magic wand today, which ones would you take off of your plate so that we could reduce stress and burden on our troops and remain good at what we're asked to do?
In terms of the mission, yeah,
Correct.
I believe at this time the counterterrorism mission for our national mission force is the most important mission that we do, #1 priority, and that's because that's to protect the homeland. I think that within that mission, much like some of the aspects we've done with the Africa optimization, it's not necessarily take away a mission, but I see reduction internal to some of these missions rather than get away, take a mission off the plate. You specifically mentioned the countering weapons of mass destruction mission. That for SOCOM, that is largely a staff and look at process where the resources for that actually came completely from our strategic command. And so it hasn't increased a burden on the force, but I'm glad you asked it. And so I think it's a right sizing of the missions internal to make sure we have the right force allocation against it. You have my pledge to look at, do we have the right forces at the right place, and are they overstressed? And if they are, I will call that signal bell immediately.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I know you're the quintessential professional, so you won't ever ask for things to be taken off your plate, but it's our responsibility to ensure you're not being overtasked. And what I'm hearing is the CT mission should remain the primary focus. Okay, Mr. Mitchell?
I would echo General Clarke's comments, particularly about the CWMD counter-VEO coordination mission being mostly a headquarters function and not requiring deployment of forces. The return also back to the discussion earlier about the 2-to-1 dwell time ratio as the floor that we're seeking. I think having a department-wide policy with respect to that is an important tool in our management toolbox to say no to those missions that aren't priority missions for the nation and to protect the force moving forward. And I think that's going to be our main tool. We as the civilian leadership have to set the priorities for the missions and help shape and protect the force, but that tool of the dwell time is extremely important.
And other than that dwell time tool, are there other tools that you're missing that allow you to make that prioritization?
No, I don't think in terms of tools missing. We have a role in the development of policy. Obviously, SOLEC is dual-hatted, both as a service secretary and a policy. And I think in our policy role, we can advocate for the appropriate prioritization of the missions. Internal to the department, the secretary has asked us to take a look at how we view globally our CT efforts and how we're managing those. And we expect to change the way that the department is looking at those. And again, that's our main tool for shaping employment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. Before I go to Mr. Gallagher, we hear a lot about what is a priority SOF mission, but what in your minds is not a priority mission for SOF?
Chairman, it's the way I look at it, it would be, what are those security force assistance type mission that could, in fact, pivot to another force. And I'll use an example would be our security force advisory brigades. Soft should be in places where it's a light footprint, it's politically sensitive, with a small team, that is training other special operations forces primarily. But I think there's opportunities going forward with the element that I just mentioned that the Army has developed, where in fact a security force advisory brigade that has company commanders and battalion commanders that have been trained conventionally can train conventional forces from other forces if we can have a footprint. So I think that would be an example of something that SOF doesn't have to do any longer going forward. And obviously I'll work very closely with the Army and with the Department to make sure that we have the right force applied.
Secretary, comment on that?
I would echo that comment. I think that's really the major area. Of course, our CT forces, there's nobody else in the department that can provide that mission and that effective force. And the security force assistance, whether it's in joint staff exercises or other types of engagements, we need to be very selective in which one of those that we take on and make sure that we maximize our support from our general purpose forces.
Thank you. And last, I wanted to ask, what is when will the Army brigades be available outside of Afghanistan?
Well, I think we'll have to take that one for the record. I don't have enough visibility on the Army's force generation process to answer that.
Okay, I want to get those in. So thank you. I'm sorry. The chair now recognizes Mr. Gallagher for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Crow's line of questioning as well as the ranking member's line of questioning. I think we sort of have bipartisan agreement around the conceptual shift embedded within the NDS. Sort of we're moving towards the near-peer fight, great power competition. Therefore, counterterrorism cannot be ignored, but it's not the top priority. You've both stated that counterterrorism is your bread and butter. But as you look at that shift, right, I mean, as we try and implement the national defense strategy, not only sort of throwing around heady terms like great power competition, but specifically to move from a paradigm of deterrence by punishment to deterrence by denial, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. Just in as specific terms as you can, what role do you think Socom will play in that effort? If the answer is you'll cover the CT mission while other forces do deterrence by denial in the Pacific, that's okay as well. Just help us flesh that out.
I would offer a couple thoughts. As we talked about earlier, our special operations forces excel at building partner capacity with similar forces. And as we look to shift to that denial, I think we'll find our soft forces being involved in that. Remember, the Chinese and the Russian threats are global threats. And that's one of the reasons why, part of the reason why we're in 80 countries, because we are addressing those threats and trying to gain influence and legitimacy with those partners. Again, I think we'll play a significant role in that. We have a built-in advantage as a preferred partner for providing security assistance, and I think we need to leverage that, again, to build our influence. One example I would give right now, in the Philippines, this committee, the chairman of the HASC recently agreed to allow us to move forward with an important CT effort, but that's also a critical component of building influence with that country and maintaining, keeping Chinese at arm's length.
And General Clarke, if you could comment, and also building upon that, I mean, besides the relationship with the Philippines, as you look at the Indo-PACOM region in particular, what partnerships jump out to you as ones that Socom in particular, but DOD in general should prioritize, with a long-term China threat in mind?
Right. Immediate to mind comes in Korea and Japan. Mm-hmm. We have a special operations, Korea Theater Special Operations Command, not just assist with a conflict on the peninsula, but it can also look broader. special operation forces in Okinawa, in Japan, that can help with that great power competition and have a sense for around the country. But those are two where we have large U.S. presence. I think the other countries that fall into that, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and in the future, I think India is a great partner, specifically for us. That we don't have a great soft presence there now, but my predecessor, General Thomas, traveled to India earlier this year specifically to engage the Indians for the future. It's a great question. Thank you.
So that might be an area where we could grow going forward. So just final on, the other big conceptual shift that I'm struggling to understand in the NDS is this idea of sort of a contact, a blunt layer, a surge layer, and a homeland layer. How should we think about where SOF sort of fits in that taxonomy?
I think we fit in the contact layer day in, day out across the globe, making contact with partners and allies and being in a position to reduce the influence of the Russians and the Chinese. I would just point out that they're willing to fill a vacuum anytime we leave somewhere or move out. They're more than willing to get in, and so I think it's a primary role that we play in that contact layer.
If I could, the only other thing I'd say, I agree with Secretary Mitchell's comments, but against Russia and China, we don't have to compete mano a mano. There are places where China and Russia exist, Djibouti, in South America, that our actions there could also work in that layer that I think we should consider going forward.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent you're talking about subconventional gray zone type competition, I completely agree. Thank you both, gentlemen. Thank you. My time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Brown is now recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presence today and for your service to our nation. Maybe about 6 or 7 weeks ago, I wrote a letter to Secretary Shanahan, joined by a number of members in this committee, where we expressed our deep concern on the use of military service members and Department of Defense resources for operations on the southwest border and construction of a border wall. As you know, the President invoked Section 2808 of Title 10, which allows unobligated MILCON funds to be used as a source of funds for the border wall. So my question is, how does this impact Socom? How many projects are unobligated? How does this compound the unfunded requirements by further delaying unfunded projects?
It's my understanding that there are no decisions have been made with respect to taking any Socom MILCON funding. There are a number of projects, I believe number 6, that are on the list of potential projects, but there's been no decision made on those specific projects. So it has not to date had any impact on Socom.
And assuming that that one or more of those 6 would see funds taken away, what would be the impact?
I would have to reevaluate at the time on the specific project and how long it would be delayed.
And I would voice and echo Mr. Mitchell's point. I would weigh in from the impacts if it were decided that one of our MILCON projects was there. But I would also highlight, Mr. Brown, to Congressman Brown, to your first question, is there are no Socom forces on the border. There's been no impact to Socom thus far because of the border employment.
Another question, how would deferred counter-drug programs under Section 284C of Title 10, how would that impact Socom and transnational organized crime efforts?
So SOLIC also has responsibility for counter-narcotics and transnational organized crime. All of our DOD counter-narcotics efforts are at this time fully funded, and none of the funds that have gone from 284 have been actually taken from our counter-narcotics budget. We distributed all of our funds to our National Guard. Our DOD demand reduction is fully funded, and we're continuing to support our law enforcement partners around the globe using our 284 authorities.
Okay, because in a response that I received just recently to my inquiry, and the response was from Kenneth Rapuano. He did indicate that activities supporting counter-drug and counter-transnational organized crime activities under Section 284C of Title 10 would be deferred to the end of the current fiscal year or fiscal year 2020. So what you're saying is but Socom effort in that program wouldn't be impacted.
So there's no impact to Socom, and I think ASD Rapuano is our ASD for Homeland Defense and Global Security. At the time that that letter was written, there was discussion within the department and with the White House about potentially holding those funds pending a decision. Those funds have all been released by OMB and the comptroller, and so the letter was accurate at the time, but the situation has changed since then, and again, has no impact on our on soft forces.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Waltz now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to echo my colleagues' gratitude to really, I know you're in your dream job, so really to your families who are putting up and once again suffering with your service. But thank you, and thank you, ma'am, as well. Just want to go back to Africa for a moment, where I understand you're going through optimization, which is really a reduction of a footprint. What are we not doing there? Where are we taking risk? I've served in Niger, Nigeria, all along West Africa. I mean, the geography is just intense, vast. Libya, I understand the operations that are going on there in terms of the evacuation. East Africa, Coney Mission. I mean, it was already, I think, chronically under-resourced. So what are we not doing? Then what are we doing with the optimization of those forces if we're not increasing dwell time? Where are they shifting to? Just walk us through what we're no longer going to do or do as much in that theater.
I'll take first stab at it. On the Africa optimization, I'm glad you raised it because it was looked at through the lens of threat to our homeland and the specific CT mission that we were conducting, and any force that was decided that would no longer needed were the only forces that came out. And I can talk specific numbers in the closed hearing as to what came out, but it really did go to what is important in our vital national interest, and then could another, in this case, an ally, do it, because it's clearly in particular our European allies' best interest because of migration into their area of operations and into specific to their populations. So that's really the lens at which the Africa optimization did. And some of these programs were enduring programs that truthfully just needed a relook.
Okay.
So that's the way I would.
I'll look for more detail perhaps in the closed session. Hope we can get there. It just occurs to me that is, if we are looking at a shift to great power competition, that there's a confluence there between resource competition, China's involvement, Russia's re-involvement, and the CT space, where half the world's population is going to be by 2050. I think it was already an under-resourced area, but just in the interest of my few minutes, I want to go back to light attack. Do you need that capability now?
I'd say we have some capability now, but we need to continue to grow it.
Was that, the Air Force went through this, started a program in 2009, that did not come to fruition. Now we're looking at a continued experimentation, and I've been pretty vocal on the record that while we, of course, as a nation need things that fly far, fast, and high, we need things that fly low, armored, and can loiter, and can land in places like West Africa. So I will continue to press frankly, the Air Force on that capability. We need it now. And while we shift to great power, I think that's a comfort zone for lots of places in the building, that we can't forget those operators like Chief Farmer, that I was at the funeral this morning as well, that are out there in 70, 80 countries as we speak. CivCas, let me ask you this way, does the geographic combatant commanders feel like they have full responsibility with the shift? I guess what I'm trying to get at is with the shift of the theater Special Operations Command in 2013, 2014, reporting to Socom, I just sense, is there a disconnect? I know obviously you're responsible for the training, you hand them off to the geographic combatant commander. There is an operational line there, but I'm thinking back to the ongoing Niger investigation. Now in East Africa, it seems to be a trend there. I think in Afghanistan and those combat theaters, they seem to have more pieces in place for oversight. Do you sense a disconnect there, number one? And then number two, I'm very mindful of an overreaction to where we tend to pull flexibility away from the ground force commanders. And what's your thoughts? And welcome, both of you.
I don't see any disconnect. You specifically mentioned the Theater Special Operations Command. They're COCOM to me. They're assigned to me, but they're actually under the operational and tactical control of the geographic combatant commander. So that strike approval process and the CivCas that is monitored and watched to prevent is all done based on the intent of the geographic combatant commander. So Congressman, I don't see any disconnect at all.
From a policy perspective, the combatant commanders are solely responsible for the conduct of operations within their AORs, and we hold them accountable for implementing the department's measures with respect to civilian non-combatant casualties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Waltz. Ms. Hopkins now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks. It's great to see you guys. I know everyone has lauded you and said how happy they are to see you, but I know that for a lot of us, we sleep easier knowing that you two are in the jobs that you're in, so thank you for that. A lot of my questions have been asked, so I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction. I was asking a number of the service chiefs last week about the value of allies and partners, and in particular the SOF world. And I know from my time, we watched a number of countries go from being sort of middling to being better and being able to conduct and perform operations with us. Can you help us understand what would happen if those allies and partners, let's say with us in West Africa, in the Middle East, decided not to support those missions? What would your budget request look like? How would it be different?
Congresswoman, the number one thing that I look at from what you're raising is what our allies and partners give us is the access and placement and the posture to be able to project our power going forward. And specifically, we do that from a CT and a VEO aspect focused on the high-end threat. Mm-hmm. But it also allows us, as both of us have said, to actually compete with Russia and China. In terms of what that could mean for budget, I think it looks to the posture aspect of what would we then have to do differently where we couldn't get in to a specific country. And there are a lot of variations on this depending on where and when that happened. You may need additional ships. You may need additional long legs for some of your aircraft. So having the posture that can be forward, allowed by our allies or partners is critical.
Mm-hmm.
I would just offer that we also have responsibility for UN peacekeeping. And a recent study looked at the cost of deploying a battalion from another troop-contributing country in lieu of a U.S. Or a similarly sized U.S. organization. The cost to deploy that U.S. force would be 8 times as much as the support that we offer through the UN. So we very much value the contribution of our partners and allies. As I said earlier, that's the most cost-effective way, is having competent and willing partners and allies.
Let me shift gears. The designation on Monday of the IRGC as a terrorist organization, a foreign terrorist organization, and then the retaliatory declaration that CENTCOM is a foreign terrorist organization. What contingency plans have you all put in place? How do you think this is going to affect you? What work have you done to prepare yourselves for what may be, I don't know, a different world based on how Iran plans to act?
We don't want to address any specific force protection measures in this forum, but what I would say is that the IRGC has been a threat to U.S. forces for decades, since the 1983 bombing through Khobar and then into Iraq, where they're responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American servicemen and women. And so we have been aware of the threat for a long time and have factored that in to our protections. And again, we're happy to talk a little bit more in detail in the closed session on that.
But so you supported the designation?
The department offered its views during the interagency process. The decision has been made by the State Department to designate them, and we're supportive of that.
Okay. I yield back my time.
Mr. Conaway is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chairman. Appreciate that. Just real quickly, a whole lot more mundane subject, but nevertheless important, and that is auditing the Department of Defense books involves everybody. And can you help me and the rest of us understand where your role is and how important it is to you that we get that done? And are you going to make it?
From a macro perspective, Socom underwent its first audit. They were unable to give any kind of real grade. One of the challenges that we face is that the Socom accounting systems are dependent upon the service accounting systems. And so to the degree that we're depending on them, it's very difficult for us to get to that complete auditability. Don't get me wrong, we are very much interested in making sure that we get to that point. But the limiting factor on us right now, the most significant one, is the service accountability procedures.
General Clarke.
Yes, sir. One, SOCOM welcomes the audit. It helps us see ourselves, and I think it's actually a good thing when you can look at yourselves and get an outside look to help us get better. You know, there were 69 internal controls identified in the audit that we will look at strongly and come up with a path to try to reduce those down, because at the end of the day, this is a good thing. Then will help us get better and actually save some money in the long run.
So have you actually assigned somebody either in uniform or a civilian specific responsibility for shepherding each of those to completion?
I can't tell you today.
The idea is if everybody's responsible, then nobody's responsible.
But Congressman, we will have someone responsible. Ultimately, myself reporting to the Secretary is responsible for getting it done, and I assure you we will get that done.
Okay. Well, again, it's important on lots of levels. Probably I appreciate both your attitude to that, and I'll add my congratulations to both of you. And Sergeant Major, thank you for your long years of service. There's an awful lot of hash stripes on all three of y'all's sleeves. I can't see the Air Force sleeves, but that's an awful lot of time away from mom and dad and the kids, and a lot of birthdays missed and a lot of anniversaries missed and a lot of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities back home that were missed. And so you're doing the fun part. I try to thank the families more than anybody else because they bear the largest brunt of keeping you in the fight. And so on behalf, please thank your families for what all they've put up with over all these years of your long service. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Conaway. And I, too, echo those comments. I want to thank you, Secretary Mitchell and General Clarke, for your testimony here today, for your service to our nation. Mrs. Clarke, it was an honor to meet you as well. I'm glad you could attend today's hearing. And before I close out the hearing, I, too, want to congratulate Command Sergeant Major Patrick McCauley on your retirement. Command Sergeant Major began his career as a Marine in 1986, joined the SOF community and went to assessment and selection and a Special Forces qualification course, and now you retire as the Socom Senior Enlisted Leader. A great deal to be proud of, and many great years of service to our country, so for which we are all grateful, and I wish you well in the next chapter in your life. With that, thank you all again for your service, and I hope you express our appreciation, the committee's appreciation to all of those under your command and all the part of the Socom family, both the families themselves and the men and women who wear the uniform. We are all grateful and indebted to you for your service. Thank you for what you do. This hearing will now, the public hearing will now adjourn, and we will reconvene in closed session.